Hi, my name is Paul Iarrobino. I'm the founding director of Our Bold Voices, and I thought I would provide a little context to our panel discussion that you're going to see in a few minutes. Briefly, our storytelling company has been around for 10 years, and we started off with performances in community, and that's our roots, where we work with new storytellers and we specialize in underrepresented or marginalized voices. And then during the pandemic, some interesting things happened. Namely, we couldn't be in community anymore, and it felt like a very long time. If you remember, there was just like, what do we do? And 6 feet apart and all of that. So we started our first book, actually, I think it's right here, COVIDology. And it was a result of us gathering in community and supporting each other. And many of the people in those groups were LGBTQ folks, but not all. Many of them were older adults as well. And so when things started to kind of go back to the new normal, I felt the need to capture these stories around resilience. And so it's a it's a fairly tiny book compared to our newer books. But since then, we have been focusing on capturing LGBTQ plus voices because over time there has been this uh, seems like an accelerated interest in erasing queer voices, especially trans voices. So I felt really committed to making sure that we were able to record our own histories. And so we started with our first book called Defining Moments. And then the book after that one was Defiant Moments. And that was very timely given what's happened in our country. And we are now on to our next book that will be released next month. Some of the writers are the same, some of them are different. And in this panel discussion, all of the writers that are in Defiant Moments will be in our next book. So I'm hoping that this will serve as uh, a helpful way of reminding us in terms of how we can be present in community. For me, as the publisher, editor, I want to make sure that our voices are recorded. And so when we produce our books, we tour with them. And with our last book in 2025, we toured, I believe, 29 times, mostly in the Northwest. We're based here in Portland, Oregon, but we did venture down to Los Angeles, where one of our authors is. And also last year, we were making an effort to travel to more rural destinations where it's harder for people to sort of see themselves in community. And we're very committed to that with our book that we're releasing next month. So we've got pretty big plans for it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. There'll be some images up, but our website is ourboldvoices.com. My email address is paul at ourboldvoices.com. And yeah, I hope you enjoy and would love to hear from you. All right. Thanks so much. Take care. My name is Paul Iarrobino, and I'm the director of Our Bold Voices. We're an indie press here in Portland, Oregon, and we have done a number of anthologies. And all of our authors have been part of our anthology, some from the very beginning. We're working on our fourth anthology right now. All of our authors here will be on that anthology as well. So I thought it'd be helpful if we would just have a conversation. And really, what I'd like to start with is maybe what was your motivation for sharing a story? So some of you have contributed one story, two stories, some of you have been in all of them. But from a storytelling perspective, or as a queer person, what was your motivation for sharing a story? I'll start there. So anybody want to respond to that question? I'm going to be looking for a hand, and it's going to be Heidi first. Go ahead, Heidi.
Um, so for me, contributing stories about this was a challenge for me personally because I'm not a writer. I've designed training and I tell stories when I do trainings, but it's a different thing to write a story that's meant to be this one piece, um, that's sort of hopefully stands the test of time. And um, what I really have enjoyed about it is that the topics, the themes that we've been focusing on have given me an opportunity um, to explore parts of my past that are simply there in my memory, but I've never really talked about. And to surface things and to recognize the connection between those things that happened in the past and who I am now.
Great.
So it's been really powerful. I contributed to the second anthology and as well as to the third and now the fourth. And each time I get some new piece for myself. So
Great. Thank you. Thanks. I saw that Scott, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Um, I started out just because I was interested in working with Paul, and then it really just grew after that. I found that writing allowed me to piece together things that weren't connected in my brain, and more excitingly, it allowed me to remember things that I had forgotten, which was the most exciting part of it to me. The whole putting together of a past that I hadn't necessarily thought of before. And then the added benefit is that I get a chance to work with people who are going through some of the same process. So you get to not only process things yourself, but to co-process things with other people.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Anybody else want to chime in? Jamison, go ahead.
Well, I am a writer, and I love any opportunity I get to contribute to any kind of publication almost. But I particularly did also want to work with Paul because Paul is a convener of storytellers, and it's not often that writers get an opportunity to be visible out in the community with their writing. And I also like the challenge of the themes that Paul selects and the process of that we go through as a group, working on the stories, workshopping them together. I think it's really exciting. It's a different way of working as a writer. It's a stretch in some ways. It's also in some ways confining because sometimes he gives us a word limit and then I get frustrated, but but I work it out. And that's a great challenge. And it's a great process and getting out in the community and doing the readings that Paul organizes also is a real benefit.
Okay, I'm going to now move to a second question, and I'm going to now start with John and Russell because uh, as I'm hearing all of you talk, not everybody knows about what we do, but a big part of us is not just the publishing of the stories, but it is touring with our book. And this past year, we've toured, I think it was 28 times. It was very busy. And I want to get your sense of what that experience has been like as a writer. So, John or Russell, who wants to start? It looks like John's laughing. So, John, you're going to go ahead first. Go ahead.
Um, I when I wrote the first story, and uh, I really hadn't thought about presenting it to the public after writing it. It never occurred to me that we would be reading shortened versions of our story for the public. Um, and it's been a delightful surprise because we've met so many wonderful people who are in different places in their life, and it sort of inspires them to talk about things, and some of them are even thinking about writing themselves, and it's been really joyful to watch people sort of blossom at these readings and to hear their stories, and I think I think the process of writing and of talking about writing uh, really is quite an eye-opening experience and an education. And I agree with Jameson. It really broadens you. There are things you don't think about at the time you're writing this story that come up. And people ask questions and in these public venues, and you really have to dig deep in yourself and think about how you're going to answer them. And it's also been a great experience working with younger people. That was a big surprise for me and a delight about how inspiring they are and how really focused they are about wanting to do things and bring out things within themselves to talk about. So I hope we've helped the public do that by these presentations we've done. And it is sort of challenging to shrink your story down to something that is manageable in size so that you don't dominate the entire conversation. And it helps to, I think, to learn that process and to practice it. I think it helps.
Thank you, John. Russell, what about for you?
Well, I'm one of the ones that's located in another state. I'm in Southern California, but I've had the great opportunity to go up to Portland and the Northwest for two different books. I've participated, this will be my third, so I participated in two books already. And we've also done a book launch here in Los Angeles. So I've had a big range of exposure to people. I didn't realize when I was getting involved in this how deep I had to dig within myself to tell my story. And at the encouragement of Paul, particularly the first time, his response, I remember, was, "You know what, Russell, I know you. I know there's more." And I, in the past, have been a private person, and I've done a lot of research. I've done documentaries, and I've done a lot of fiction or writing as far as screenplays and theater pieces. So this was very, very different. The incredible reward was in the touring process because people would come up to relate that there was something in the story that was within them or they had experienced or with their loved ones. It really touched me to the point of both laughter and tears. And also I got to see, as John was talking about younger people, I got to see the range of our community and their experience. And I've got to tell you that one of the best ones was going to the senior center, the Hollywood Senior Center, and standing up there and looking out and thought, these are all LGBTQ people? Really? All these senior citizens? This is fantastic. Really proud moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Russell. So as I'm hearing you talk, it makes me think of some things that I guess I can't see the forest and the trees because this is what I do with you all the time. But a couple of thoughts. One is I'm hearing you talk about the relatability of your stories and the contact with the people at our events. And just from our last tour, we have 7 new authors who are coming along with us. And we always say, you know, about half of our authors are first-time authors, or at least they were when they started. So it creates maybe more accessibility and more opportunity. People feel a little bit more confident submitting something. So that makes me feel really good. But I'm curious, from these events, does anything come to mind? Have you had a particular interaction with somebody that came up to you and either asked a question there or privately? I'm just kind of curious what the potential impact might be of the connection. Anybody think of something? Scott, go ahead.
It's hard to forget one of our trips to a local college town where a woman raised the hand and said, you know, I've known that I was a man from the beginning, but it was just too much trouble to go through the process. And I remember, being sort of caught at mid-breath with all of that, because you had just related a person's entire life struggle right there. And she said it from the bottom of her heart. And I thought it was just wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have something that comes to mind? If you don't, it's fine. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Russell and then Jamison.
In my first book with you, with COVIDology, I revealed the fact that I had had cancer for the first time, the first time that I had it. And it was the first time that actually I acknowledged it in public. And at one of the readings, a couple came up to me and in, almost in tears at the beginning. We were all in tears by the end of our conversation. But it was because it was a man and a woman, because the man had just been diagnosed and they were really at a loss of what to do. And they asked me if they could reach out. And I said, absolutely. So that was incredibly touching.
Very nice. Very nice. Glad that happened. Jamison?
Well, right after one of our readings, I was approached by a young trans man who asked if I would be his mentor. And we then went on to meet on a fairly regular basis for quite a while. He was searching for a, a new career. He was trying to figure out a lot of things in his life having nothing to do with being a trans man, other than that's who he was. Um, and ultimately, he decided to go to Ireland and build a life there. And that was a couple of years ago, and it was really an amazing experience. So I was very honored by that request. It
I'm
was,
getting goosebumps
it was my story.
only because one of our authors is from Dublin, Ireland, and we've never had anybody from Ireland. I'm not saying it's the same person, but whew. Wow, that's great. That's so nice that you put yourself out there and people can kind of play off that energy and want to be able to connect with you. One of the things I've realized is that I don't really see myself as an author. I'm starting to slowly identify with that, but I'm more of a storyteller, and I kind of got in, through a side door because of the pandemic. But I remember sitting down having coffee with one of our writers in our last book, and he's a writer. He teaches writing. He's a writer. He's an author. And so he came to us because one of our storytellers highly recommended it and really liked the process. I'm like, okay. So when we were doing our last book, we were simply asking for a pitch, a 500-word pitch. And that's much, much easier. But what he told me is like, oh, good Lord, I had no idea that it was this involved. Like you pitch a story, and then you work with the developmental editor, then you work with the beta readers, and then you have the copy. Like it's like, I didn't sign up for that. Like I was shocked, but he actually kind of liked it. But he also said, why are you making it so hard? Like you should just be like other publishers and just have people send you a story, which is what we're doing now in the next book, right? So I think it will make the process a little quicker. So I guess what I want to ask, since some of you have been with us in the very beginning and we had slightly different variations, but we do have a lot of steps for quality control. So I'm curious what that experience has been for you. And also part of that is peer review, right? Where we're having Zoom calls and working on your shorts together. So I'm just curious what that experience has been like. Okay, we're going to start with Heidi, and then we're going to go to John, and then we're going to go to Scott. Look at that. Okay, Heidi, oops, you're muted. You're muted. It's okay.
Thank you. I have really loved the longer, more in-depth processes going through all the pieces, especially not seeing myself as an author. Because for me, like when I started my story and sent you a first draft, my story that ended up was nothing like what I sent you. And a lot of that was in the conversation with you and subsequent editing. What I got out of the process was help figuring out how to find the story. And that's a process that takes discernment. And for me, it really helped having other people ask questions and help me find out what felt important, what felt like, is it the wheat versus the chaff or something like that? Um, and it was an incredibly powerful thing for me in better understanding my own history, understanding the pieces of it. And, when I tell a story without any prep, it's got, oh, let's talk about this part. And then my uncle. And then when I was in school, it's got all these pieces to it. And so having somebody, sort of guide the through line
Mhm.
was really valuable in the levels of, first the developmental part and then the I don't know if is it the copy editor or the beta reader first, I can't remember, but when Satreya looked at things, and then the peer review, like sitting in the workshops when we developed particularly our short versions with each other, that was some of the most valuable things I ever got. Those Zoom calls where we're, reading our excerpt and people are saying, not just about the story itself, like, this felt too long, or I didn't understand this, or whatever, but also how you read it could be enhanced if you do this. To me, that whole process that may have felt like way too much for the other person, for me was life changing. I loved it.
Great. Okay, thank you. John, I think you're next.
Um, I had a curious resistance at first to having to change anything about the story that I wrote. I was very protective of it and said, no, no, I'm not gonna, no, it's gonna stay exactly the way it is. No, I think everything is just perfect. Thank God I did not go with that thought, because later when I read, after we had had many workshops together and people gave feedback and I went back and rewrote things, I didn't like the process of having to rewrite, because you had to stretch your brain. You had to think about how people were going to perceive things. And as Heidi said, the wheat from the chaff. A lot of the detail stuff. You really learn how to tighten things up, and that's a really valuable thing when you're writing. I had no idea how important that was until we started all of this, and um, and so the story that you start with is really not the one you end up with all the time. The maybe the nucleus of it is, but the telling of it, I think, changes. And the same is true for the presentations we did, the shortened versions that we read to the public. That was a real challenge, because you had to cut out entire parts that might have been important to the original story and were important to you, but you couldn't stand up in front of an audience and read something that was 20 minutes long. I mean, you'd put them all to sleep. And plus, nobody else would be able to speak after you, or everybody would get up and leave. So this was a real challenging experience, but I think it was a really valuable one to have other people's feedback, because without it, I'm not quite sure where I would have ended up. And when I wrote the second story for Defiant Moments, I thought a little more about the perception of it and what people were going to get out of it and what was necessary, and what really, even though it was rattling around in my brain, was probably not something valuable to put in the story. So I think you learn a little bit each time you do these, that uh, what really helps and what sort of goes right to the core of storytelling. And like Heidi was saying, and other people have said, I'm really more of a verbal storyteller, and I can go on and on and on, as Paul knows. And you can't do that when you write. I mean, it's a different process, especially if you're writing in an anthology with other authors. And I'm glad I started this way. I'm not sure I'm going to continue writing longer things, but the shorter versions, short stories, have really it's been quite an education, and I think I've learned a lot about how to do it, though I certainly am no expert at this point.
Great. Thanks, John. Scott, I think you're next.
The part that I loved about was when I would carefully explain something in story, and then one of the people would read it and they would go, "This doesn't make any sense," and then I'd go, "But I just explained it." And it took me, but it was like, but wait a minute here. It isn't, not writing this story for me. I'm writing this story for other people. And if they can understand it, then it's not understandable. And it was like I had some sort of like crush to my ego all of that. But it was a wonderful growing experience.
Great. Russell or James? Yeah, Russell, go ahead.
So when you announced this new book on relationships, no title, just a mentor, love, or whatever, and then you announced the process that you were no longer going to have the process that you had in previous book, I panicked. I was like, I ain't doing this.
I thought people would be celebrating.
The 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 deadline was a certain day, and Russell submitted it at 9:20 p.m. the day of.
I
Okay.
recall, yes.
Yes, that's
You
how
and,
much
you
I
and
was,
14 other people, yes.
how much I was kicking and screaming. Why? Because I got so much out of the process.
Mm.
And in the past, it's been so difficult, particularly writing screenplays or writing theater pieces, to find good editors to work with. And unfortunately, my best editor passed away a number of years ago. So I really, really cherished this entire process. What it did, going through that with two books, is it's made me a better writer. And the reason, not only was I kicking and screaming about doing this, I knew that I wanted to. I kept telling people, I'm hitting the wall, I'm hitting the wall, I'm not getting anything. Nothing's coming. And of course the date was coming, right? And one of the things was that through the process of writing my last story, I became those people that we've just talked about. I heard your voices in the group chat. I heard James, Jim, who was my first copy editor. I heard Citri. I heard those people. I got that. Write it in the first person, Russell. It's stronger, for at least for my stories, which I didn't used to do that. All of that came together. And even then, when I submitted it that night, when Paul, I know he gets up really early in the morning, when he didn't respond, I thought, oh, he hates it. He doesn't like it.
It's because I got 14 of them.
I
I'm
know.
sorry. And I was reading every one at 3 in the morning. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I
Yes.
know. I got that afterwards, and to be honest, I'm really proud as to what I sent in, and a lot of it has to do with what I've learned throughout this process.
That's great. Before I get to Jamison, I do want to comment that for people who are watching, we still have a similar process. So there's still developmental editing, there's still the editing that we do, but we're asking the storytellers, the authors, to submit a final draft up front. And also, I also want to say too quickly that my experience has been, because we're now getting authors who are now doing their second story. The last book was the first. Much more confident writers, much clearer. So I think of what you're saying, Russell, holds true for others as well, is that they're stronger, better writers from going through that process. Yeah. I want to move over to Jamison to see if you wanted to add anything about this question, Jamison.
I don't remember what the question was. I've been listening to everybody talk and I forgot what the question was.
It's really about the process. So we're doing a different process now. I think you probably prefer this process because you're an experienced author, but we're doing it a little differently, but we still have a lot of those quality steps in there. So if you prefer one over the other, I don't know.
No, I love the process of workshopping stories. And, for me, it doesn't matter if I start with it's just a fragment and I'm getting feedback on that, or if I turn in a final draft and I'm getting feedback on that. It doesn't matter. The feedback process is invaluable and really enjoyable.
Oh, great. I'm going to just relay my own experience and then we're going to wind down because we're coming up on the time limit. But I just submitted a story. So I'm an author just like everybody else. And I do a lot of editing, but also I can't, judge my own story. So what I did is I submitted my story anonymously to Scott. So Scott was sort of acting as my beta reader, like, hey, we just got this new submission. What do you think? And so Scott had a lot of good things to say about it. So I'm like, okay. So, and then I had my husband look at it and made some edits. And then I got it to Satria, who does a lot of our editing. And she knew it was my story. But I said to her, can you just go in there in the Google Doc and just make the changes? Like, I trust you. She's extremely good. I don't want to see the green squiggly lines. And so she went in there and she's like, oh, I removed like the half of the middle part. I just took it out because it really slowed down your story. And I'm just like, oh, please, like do whatever you need to do. And she goes, and maybe just a sentence. You don't need all that, because she's really good about like the flow and, wants it in the active voice. And then she's like, and where you started, it's a good spot, but I think it should start actually when you're having the panic attack, not when you're in the hospital. Oh, okay. So, I mean, and I wrote a piece of fiction, which I've never done before. So it was like just magic working with her. And then I hadn't fully developed my character, and she helped me develop the character a little further. So I find it extremely rewarding as well, because I'm just like all the other authors too. I'm like, oh my God, that's great. Okay, so in the interest of time, I thought I would just ask a brief question where you can kind of, as a sort of a farewell to our conference attendees, and that is, what suggestion would you have for a queer author who's new and they're not really sure if they are ready? What do you say to them? What do you tell them? And I'm going to look for a hand to get us started. We're going to start with Russell and then Scott.
I was just at a workshop, at a writer's workshop summit in West Hollywood, and the range of ages was there. And a topic came up: are we better writers the older we get? And the younger ones were like, And the older ones were like, too. And that was really interesting for me. And I learned so much, because at whatever stage, at whatever age that we are, those are the stories that we have to tell. Right now, at my age, I'm telling stories about when I was in my 20s and when I was in my 30s. So those stories have been there. Now, the way I tell the story and my point of view and my perception of the story is different, because I'm at this particular stage in my life. But the story hasn't changed. So my encouragement would be to write that wherever you are, about your experiences, whether they be nonfiction or fiction, or make them, what's called out of fiction, if you want. And that's my input.
Thank you. Thanks. Anybody else? I think Scott had your hand up. Go ahead.
For me, I just sat down and started to write. I was like, I can't write fiction. I don't know anything about this. What am I going to do? I don't have anything to write. So I just started writing down and wrote. By the time I get done, I had a story that was 10,000 words long, and we could only had 5,000 words. And it's just sit down and do it. And it's all there.
Okay. Anybody want to add anything? Okay, John.
Yeah, I think I would tell people pretty much the same thing. I think people are hung up on the idea when they are thinking about writing something that they're not an author. I'm not an author. I don't know what I'm doing. It's going to be bad. Somebody who is an author is going to pick this up and say, "What is this crap that you have written?" All those things go through your mind, and I agree with what Scott said, just write, just get it out on paper. The editing process can come later. It's not that big a deal. You just have to sort of swallow your discomfort with how you see yourself and what you think an author is. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Heidi, go ahead.
What I would say is that there's this idea for authors, and maybe new authors especially, thinking that you want to write this great all-encompassing piece that is going to change the world. And maybe you will, I mean, who knows? But I think if what you do is let go of that notion and take something that's just a nugget, something in your life that is special for you, or fun for you, or interesting for you, something you want to explore, and then just write about that. Just start there and embellish it. You can add, and with this latest book, what was really fun about it is you could add truth and you could add fiction, and it was awesome because I added things to my story that didn't happen that way, but really should have once I wrote them. And I think if you just let yourself have fun with it, push yourself to write. You know, some people say do it every day, but just start with something, some essence that intrigues you, because it's your interest that's going to interest the people who read what you write.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. Jamison, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Heidi. It's your interest that drives the story. But the other thing that you need to be aware of is that the magic of writing, you do something here on the page, the magic happens out there where you don't see it. It's somewhere in the ether between the reader's mind and what you express. And you don't have control over that. The best you can do is to try to get the kernel of the emotion in the story out there so that somebody else can feel it in their own way
Mhm.
and then make sense of it in their mind, and that's it. And if it affects them, then you were successful. But
Those
if
are
you've
great.
told it the way you know, the way that it's clearest to you, and the way that it moves you, that's the best that you can do.
Those are great words of wisdom. I just want to quickly add, I didn't keep track because we had so many submissions, and this is the most authors we've ever had in a book before. I think we're at 28 right now, and usually we're at 15. And so I think that we had to say no to about 50% of the authors. And I will say that there were two, established gay authors who submitted something, but it didn't really meet the criteria. And I was like, this person's a name, but I can't really use that story because we're looking for friendship, mentorship, relationship, and it didn't meet that. And so I felt like maybe they had something written. They're like, oh, this is a little indie, whatever. I'm a name. They'll take my story. No, I said no, and I did say yes to some other authors that are out there. But I want to say this, and some of you were at Pendleton, and there was a young woman author, and she submitted something, first time author, and she got it. Like, this is a piece that she was really proud of. She had been working on it for a while. She sent it to me like the next day after I said you should send me a piece, but I think she already had it. She had a story to tell, and it was perfect, and it needed very little editing. So I don't think it really matters if you're an author, an established author or not. You really have to sort of think about what the goal is in terms of you're writing for somebody else or just for yourself. So I really like what you're having to say in terms of the ability to express yourself creatively. So we're out of time. I'm going to end the recording here.